A friend of mine in my Rotary Club always says, "You are what you eat." He's 83 years old, in very good condition, mentally alert, and he eats the right food. We all know people like this, and I wish I could, get to that point in my life. At our lunch meeting, he eats all the veggies, and I eat everything else. But he's right. In fact, we are what we eat. Well, this morning we hear about eating the bread of life and living forever, never being hungry. And we know that John was using metaphor. Eating flesh and drinking blood is cannibalism. And we know that that is not at all what Jesus was encouraging. Did you ever hear the joke about the two cannibals who were eating a clown? One turned to the other and said, "Does this taste funny to you?" It's just a joke, just a joke. Well, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you cannot have life in you." And we know that he's attempting to move his followers beyond the physical realm and into the spiritual. He wants us to feel beyond the limitations of our stomachs. He's trying to teach us that if we absorb him into our lives the way we do a piece of bread, we will have his life. It's very simple, and yet so easy to misunderstand. And his followers just don't get it. Well, to make things worse, he takes it a step further. And he says, in fact, if you don't eat my flesh, if you don't drink my blood, you will not have life. Well, we know that drinking blood is totally against all Jewish custom and ritual and law. And the literal interpretation of what Jesus is saying is very offensive to them. What they don't understand is that he himself is the bread of life. He doesn't give it, he is it. And to have it, one must have him. When we accept him, his life clings to our bones and moves through our veins. He can no more be taken from our life than last Friday's breakfast can be plucked out of our stomachs. This sacred relationship with Jesus is the ultimate communion, the coming together, the union of God with us. So the crowds grumble and finally leave Jesus. It was because he offered them what they actually needed and not what they wanted. And what is it? Well, I believe the underlying message here today is about relationship. I believe Jesus is talking to them about a sacred relationship with him, which is really the key to happiness. What would we do without all the people in our lives, our family, our friends, our neighbors? These relationships give us the grace to carry on. And so it is with Jesus. His life, the life that he will give us, is the will to survive, the strength to endure, the hope that whatever the outcome, I can live, I can be happy and fulfilled, and my relationships will be strong, especially with my God. There's a chapter in one of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's books entitled "The God of the Gaps." He describes our tendency to pray to God only when we're in trouble or when we need something for some reason or another. The phrase "God of the gaps" was first used many years ago by Christian theologians who tried to explain that the gaps in scientific knowledge should be evidence or proof of God's existence. Bonhoeffer picked up this phrase and he used it to explain that God is with us all the time, not just when we're in trouble, not just when we need help. It's like the first reading we heard this morning from Joshua. Yahweh was with them through thick and thin in times of prosperity and in times of suffering. But the people viewed Jesus through a different lens. When they saw his miracles and his mighty works, they wanted to make him king. He answered their pleas for help. He healed the sick, so he must be the king that we've been expecting. Surely our king would be this type of person. Jesus, aware of this, puts it on the table. You can't have life unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood. It's something different from what they wanted. They couldn't do this, and they leave him. But there's a catch to it. You remember, after all the crowds left Jesus, later on in this chapter, only his 12 disciples were left. And he asks them, will you leave me too? Peter, we're told, spoke for the 12, and he said, Lord, to whom should we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe that you are the Holy One of God. In that moment, Peter realized that in spite of all the startling images and metaphor and confrontational words that Jesus used, in spite of the difficult path that lay ahead of him, Peter was ready to give up some control of his life in order to accept the gift of real life, to be in relationship with Jesus. And this is the issue. In order for us to be in relationship with God, we have to give up some control over our lives, and we have to let God take the lead. And this is not so easy. We want to be in complete control of what we do and how we do it. Commentator Amy Howe puts it this way. In the moment that we choose to eat Jesus' flesh and drink his blood, we truly abide in him and him in us. In that moment, we choose life. We give up the notion that we are in control. Fear no longer has the upper hand. Nothing gets in the way. We understand that we're no better than any other child of God because of our denomination or our skin color, our gender, or our job. That life, the eternal life of which Jesus spoke, has nothing to do with mortality or immortality. It's a way of living that prevents fear or anything else from having the upper hand. But we have to let God take the lead. We have to give it to him. Henri Nouwen describes it this way. When we honestly ask ourselves which person in our lives means the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice or solutions or cures, it's those who have chosen rather to share our pain, to touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. The friend can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief or bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, but face with us the reality of our powerlessness. And that's what we choose in our relationship with God. So John uses metaphor to get across the point that Jesus is not just the God of the gaps, the problem solver, the miracle worker. He's the one who wants to be with us in relationship. How does it come about? How is it sustained? How does it sustain us? Well, we never really fully know. It's like the mystery of love and the mystery of friendship. Even though we can't explain it, it's still there, and the power is no less real. It's Jesus made real and made available to us. I read the other day that Bethlehem means house of bread. And the name refers to the fact that the village of Bethlehem was situated in a fruitful and fertile place. With hard work, its soil would yield food and harvest for all people. Grain and fruit could be grown there, and there was an abundance of fresh water in the wells. It was a modest village, this village of Bethlehem, and it was blessed not so much in riches as it was in opportunity. Jesus came from that village. He saw the potential that lies within each one of us, and so desires that that potential be realized within us. This is the Jesus who said, "If you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will have abundant life." When we least expect to see the power of God in our troubled world, a world of shootings, a world of wars, there we find God working out his purpose through ordinary means of flesh and blood, in the good and in the bad. So the question is, will we be among the 12 who remained saying, "Lord, to whom should we go? You have the words of eternal life." Let it be so among us.